April 12, 2023. Persian Gulf, 47 nautical miles southeast of Bandar Abbas. The hull groaned softly as Captain First Rank Reza Ahmadi felt the Tareq settle into her patrol depth. 120 meters beneath the surface, the Kilo-class submarine glided through the warm waters of the Persian Gulf like a predator born to these depths. Ahmadi's hand rested on the periscope housing, his eyes scanning the red-lit control room where 23 men worked in practice silence. "Depth steady at 120 meters, Captain," the diving officer reported, his voice barely above a whisper. In the submarine service, silence wasn't just protocol, it was survival. Ahmadi nodded. The Tareq, meaning night visitor in Farsi, was the pride of the Iranian Navy's submarine fleet. Built in Russia, the diesel-electric boat represented decades of investment, training, and strategic planning. Her anechoic tiles absorbed active sonar like a sponge swallowing sound. Her electric motors, when running on battery power, produced almost no acoustic signature. Western naval analysts called the Kilo-class the black hole for good reason. "Sonar report," Ahmadi commanded. Senior Lieutenant Kasra Mohammadi pressed his headphones tighter against his ears, eyes closed in concentration. The sonar station's displays showed cascading waterfalls of acoustic data, the ambient noise of the Gulf, the distant rumble of commercial shipping, the biological symphony of the sea. "Multiple surface contacts, Captain, bearing 270, range approximately 30 kilometers. Classify as commercial traffic. No active sonar detected. No subsurface contacts." "Very good." Ahmadi allowed himself a thin smile. They were invisible, exactly as planned. The mission brief had been clear: conduct a 72-hour patrol through the strategic shipping lanes, demonstrate presence, and return undetected. It was a message to the Americans, to the Saudis, to anyone who thought the Strait of Hormuz belonged to them. 20% of the world's oil passed through these waters. One submarine, properly positioned, could threaten that entire flow. Lieutenant Commander Davoud Rezaei, the executive officer, approached with a chart. "Captain, we're on schedule. If we maintain current speed and heading, we'll reach waypoint Delta by 0400 hours. Ahmadi studied the chart. Waypoint Delta sat astride the main shipping channel, a perfect choke point. "Excellent. Maintain silent running protocols. I want us to be ghosts." "Aye, Captain." The control room settled into the rhythm of deep patrol, the quiet hum of ventilation, the occasional ping of the hull adjusting to pressure, the soft murmur of status reports. Ahmadi had commanded the Tareq for 18 months. He knew every sound she made, every quirk of her machinery. He knew his crew, hand-picked veterans who understood that submarine warfare was as much psychology as technology. What Captain Ahmadi didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that 400 meters above his boat, a pattern of sonobuoys had just splashed into the water. And 180 kilometers to the northeast, aboard the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Porter, a young sonar technician named Petty Officer Second Class Marcus Webb was watching a contact bloom on his display screen. Sonar," Webb said calmly into his headset. "I have a possible subsurface contact, designated Sierra 1. Bearing 185, range 42 nautical miles. Diesel-electric signature, confidence is high." In the Combat Information Center, Commander Sarah Chen leaned over the tactical display. The contact marker pulsed steadily, a submarine that thought it was invisible, now painted in digital clarity. "Time to contact?" Chen asked. "At current speed, Sierra 1 will reach the shipping lane in approximately 6 hours, ma'am." Chen straightened. Above them, a P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft was already adjusting its flight path, preparing to deploy additional sonobuoys in a carefully calculated pattern. The Porter's towed array sonar, a cable stretching nearly a mile behind the destroyer, was feeding continuous data into the combat system. "Very well," Chen said. "Maintain track. Notify 5th Fleet. We're going to follow our friend for a while." The hunt had begun. Lieutenant Jake Hammer Morrison banked the P-8 Poseidon into a gentle turn, his eyes flicking between the horizon and the mission computer. At 20,000 feet, the Gulf spread beneath him like hammered bronze in the afternoon sun, a deceptive beauty that concealed one of the world's most contested waterways. Sonobuoy Pattern Alpha 3 deployed, announced Lieutenant Commander Patricia Vance from the Tactical Coordinator Station behind him. All buoys reporting nominal. We've got a solid acoustic fence across the northern sector. Morrison keyed his radio. Porter, this is Reaper 6. Pattern is active. Correlating data now. Reaper 6, Porter. Copy all. We're painting the same picture. Sierra 1 is maintaining course 090, speed 4 knots. She's trying to stay quiet. Roger that. She's doing a good job. Morrison allowed himself a slight grin. Too bad we've been listening to her for the past 6 hours. The P-8 Poseidon, a modified Boeing 737, was the most advanced submarine hunter in the world. Its belly carried torpedoes and depth charges, but its real weapons were sensors, magnetic anomaly detectors, synthetic aperture radar, and most importantly, the ability to deploy and monitor dozens of sonobuoys simultaneously. Each buoy was a sophisticated listening device, transmitting acoustic data back to the aircraft in real time. Vance studied her display, watching the waterfall patterns that represented sound in the ocean. I've got blade rate, marking 4-bladed propeller, approximately 110 revolutions per minute. Definitely a kilo. She's on batteries, trying to minimize signature. How's she doing? If this were 1985, she'd be invisible. Vance tapped her screen. But we're not in 1985. The technology gap was staggering. The Iranian Kilo-class submarines were good boats, quiet, capable, dangerous in the right circumstances. But they'd been designed in the 1980 seconds, built in the 1990 seconds, and their acoustic signatures were in every database the U.S. Navy maintained. The Tareq's anechoic tiles reduced her sonar reflection, but they couldn't eliminate the subtle sounds of machinery, the faint whir of electric motors, the minute vibrations of a hull moving through water. And the Americans had been listening to these sounds for decades. Aboard the Porter, Commander Chen watched the tactical picture evolve. The destroyer's AN/SQR 19-towed array sonar stretched behind the ship like an electronic ear, sensitive enough to detect a submarine hundreds of miles away. Combined with the P-8's sonobuoy data, they had what submariners feared most: multi-static coverage. The Iranian submarine wasn't just being tracked from one direction, she was being triangulated from multiple sources, her position refined every few minutes. "Ma'am, Sierra 1 is approaching waypoint Delta," reported the tactical action officer. "She's slowing, speed now 2 knots. Chen nodded. "She's setting up in the shipping lane, exactly what we expected." She turned to the communications officer. "Get me nav sent. They'll want to know their submarine is exactly where we said she'd be." 72 hours. That was the mission timeline Chen had been given. Track the Iranian submarine for her entire patrol, document every movement, every depth change, every course correction. Prove beyond any doubt that the US Navy owned the underwater battle space in the Persian Gulf. It was a message, delivered in the language of sonar pings and acoustic data. Below, Captain Ahmadi had no idea he was the subject of this demonstration. The Tareq had reached her patrol station, and he'd ordered the boat to ultra-quiet mode. The crew moved like shadows, speaking only in hand signals. Every non-essential system was powered down. They were, by every measure Ahmadi understood, completely undetectable. "Captain, we're in position," Reza whispered. "All systems nominal. No indication of detection." Ahmadi checked his watch. 18 hours into the patrol, 54 hours remaining. "Very good. Maintain station. Passive sonar only. I want to know everything that moves above us." What moved above them, at that precise moment, was another spread of sonobuoys, splashing into the water in a carefully calculated pattern. The P-8 had been relieved by a second aircraft, Reaper 7, maintaining continuous coverage. The watch changed, but the surveillance never stopped. In the Porter's CIC, a new watch team took their stations. Petty Officer First Class Jennifer Ortiz settled into the sonar station, scanning the data that had accumulated over the past 12 hours. The track was perfect, a continuous line showing every movement the Iranian submarine had made. "She's good," Ortiz muttered to herself. "Disciplined, but not good enough." The Tareq maintained her station for 6 hours, then began a slow transit south. The Porter followed at a discreet distance, her towed array painting a perfect picture. When the Iranian submarine went deep, the Americans tracked her. When she came shallow, they tracked her. When she changed course, they anticipated it. 48 hours into the patrol, Ahmadi began to feel the confidence that came with successful operations. They had penetrated the heart of the shipping lanes, maintained station, and remained undetected. It was a textbook mission. "Captain, recommend we begin our return transit," Reza suggested. "We can be back in Bandar Abbas in 24 hours. Ahmadi agreed. "Helm, come to course 270, maintain depth and speed." The Tareq turned for home, her crew already thinking of hot showers and solid ground. They had no idea that every turn of their propeller had been recorded, every course change documented, every depth excursion logged. The invisible submarine had been visible all along. April 15, 2023. Bandar Abbas Naval Base, 0800 hours. Captain Ahmadi stood in the debriefing room, his uniform crisp despite the exhaustion that came with 3 days submerged. The mission had been flawless: 72 hours of silent running, complete penetration of the strategic shipping lanes, zero detection. Around the table sat his executive officer, the sonar officer, and Rear Admiral Hossein Karimi, commander of the Iranian Navy's submarine force. "Gentlemen," Admiral Karimi began, his weathered face creasing into what might have been a smile, "preliminary reports indicate a successful patrol. Captain Ahmadi, your assessment?" Ahmadi straightened. "Sir, the Tareq performed exceptionally. We maintained silent running protocols throughout the operation. Sonar detected no active searching, no indication of enemy ASW activity. We held station in the shipping lanes for 6 hours without compromise. The Kilo-class continues to prove its worth as a strategic asset." Karimi nodded slowly. "And you're confident you were undetected?" "Absolutely, sir. Our acoustic signature was minimal. The anechoic coating performed as designed. If the Americans were looking for us, they found nothing." The door to the debriefing room opened. A naval intelligence officer entered, carrying a sealed folder marked with security classifications. Behind him came 2 more officers, their expressions carefully neutral. "Admiral," the intelligence officer said quietly, "we've received a communication from Navcent through diplomatic channels. They've requested a technical consultation regarding submarine operations in the Gulf." Karimi frowned. "What kind of consultation?" The intelligence officer opened the folder and spread a series of photographs across the table: satellite images, tactical charts, and something else: detailed track plots showing a submarine's movement through the Persian Gulf. Ahmadi leaned forward, studying the images. The track showed a submarine departing Bandar Abbas on April 12, proceeding southeast, then turning northeast toward the shipping lanes. Every waypoint matched his mission plan exactly. His stomach tightened. He began, then stopped. "This is the Tareq," the intelligence officer said flatly. "The Americans tracked you for the entire 72 hours. They've provided time-stamped data showing your position every 15 minutes throughout the patrol." The room fell silent. Ahmadi stared at the documents, his mind racing. It wasn't possible. They'd been so careful. Every protocol followed, every procedure executed perfectly. The intelligence officer laid down another document, a detailed acoustic analysis. They used P-8 Poseidon aircraft and destroyer-based towed array systems. Sonobuoy patterns here, here, and here. He pointed to positions on the chart. They established multi-static coverage before you even left port. They knew your departure time, your route, your patrol station, and your return course. Reza, the executive officer, spoke up. "But we detected nothing. No active sonar, no aircraft overhead, no—" "They didn't need active sonar," the intelligence officer interrupted. "Passive systems only. Your acoustic signature, minimal as it is, was sufficient for their sensors. They've included audio recordings." He produced a small device and pressed play. The sound of machinery filled the room, faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. The electric motors of the Tareq, the subtle whir of ventilation systems, the acoustic fingerprint of a Kilo-class submarine trying to be silent. Ahmadi felt the blood drain from his face. They recorded us? Continuously. They've also provided your depth changes, speed variations, and even your battery charging cycles. When you went to snorkel depth on the second night to recharge, they tracked that too. Admiral Karimi's expression had turned to stone. Why are they sharing this information? It's a message, sir. They're demonstrating capability. They want us to know that our submarine force is completely transparent to their ASW network. Every boat we put in the water, they can track. The implications crashed over Ahmadi like a wave. Decades of investment the submarines purchased from Russia, the training, the infrastructure, the strategic doctrine built around the threat of submarine warfare in the Gulf, all of it undermined in 72 hours. The submarines weren't invisible, they were fish in a barrel. How long have they been able to do this? Karimi asked quietly. Unknown, sir. But based on the sophistication of their tracking, likely for years. They've been watching us, learning our patterns, cataloguing our signatures. This demonstration was just them showing their cards. Ahmadi looked at the track plot again, seeing his mission through new eyes. Every decision he'd made, every course change, every depth adjustment, all of it observed, recorded, analyzed. He'd thought he was commanding a stealth platform. Instead, he'd been driving a beacon. The Americans have also included technical data on their sonobuoy networks. The intelligence officer continued. Deployment patterns, acoustic processing capabilities, detection ranges. It's a technical brief, essentially showing us exactly how outmatched we are. Ahmadi, the sonar officer, spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. Sir, if they can track us this easily, then our entire strategic posture in the Gulf is compromised, Karimi finished. Yes, Lieutenant, that's exactly the point they're making. The room fell into heavy silence. The Tareq had been meant to be a deterrent, a threat that kept American carriers cautious, that made Gulf shipping vulnerable. But a submarine that could be tracked continuously wasn't a threat, it was a target. Ahmadi thought of his crew, 23 men who'd performed flawlessly, who'd believed in their mission and their boat. How could he tell them that their silence had been an illusion? That every moment they'd spent in the depths, confident in their stealth, they'd been watched? What are our options? Karimi asked. The intelligence officer shook his head. Limited, sir. We can modify acoustic signatures, change operational patterns, invest in newer technology. But the fundamental problem remains the Americans have a generational advantage in ASW capabilities, their sensors, their processing power, their experience. We can't match it, not in the near term. So our submarine force is effectively neutralized. As a stealth asset, yes, sir. They'd still be effective in a direct conflict, but the element of surprise is gone. The Americans will know where every boat is, all the time. Ahmadi looked at the photographs again, at the precise track of his patrol. 72 hours of perfect execution, rendered meaningless by technology he couldn't see and couldn't counter. The invisible submarine made visible. 3 weeks later, USS Porter, Persian Gulf. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge wing, watching the sun set over the Gulf in bands of orange and purple. The water was calm, almost glassy, giving no hint of the technological warfare being waged beneath its surface. Behind her, the Porter cut through the water at 15 knots, her towed array streaming behind like an invisible net. Ma'am, you wanted to see the latest intelligence summary. Lieutenant Commander Brad Hutchins, her executive officer, approached with a tablet. Chen took it, scrolling through the report. Iranian submarine activity had dropped by 60% since the Tareq incident. The boats still went out, but their patrol patterns had changed, shorter durations, more cautious routes, a palpable hesitancy that hadn't existed before. They know we're listening, Chen said quietly. Yes, ma'am. NAVCENT assessment is that we've effectively neutralized their submarine threat for the foreseeable future. They can't operate with confidence anymore. Chen handed back the tablet. The operation had been a success by every metric. They demonstrated American ASW dominance, sent a clear strategic message, and done it without firing a shot. But she found herself thinking about Captain Ahmadi, a man she'd never met, but whose decisions she'd watched for 3 days straight. He was good, she said. The Iranian captain, disciplined, professional, he did everything right. Just not right enough, Hutchins replied. No, not against systems that cost more than his entire navy's annual budget. Chen turned back to the water. There's no honor in it, really. It's just math. We have better sensors, better processing, better everything. They never had a chance. The truth was uncomfortable. Modern naval warfare had become so technologically asymmetric that skill and courage often didn't matter. The Tareq's crew had been brave, their captain competent, their execution flawless, and none of it had made any difference. Hutchins seemed to sense her mood. "Ma'am, if it helps, the intelligence folks say this might actually prevent a conflict. If the Iranians know they can't threaten shipping with submarines, they're less likely to try something aggressive." Maybe. Chen wasn't entirely convinced. Or maybe we've just pushed them toward other options. Mines, fast attack craft, missiles. You can't track those for 72 hours. No, ma'am, different problem set. The Porter's radar swept the horizon, painting a picture of the Gulf's surface traffic tankers, container ships, fishing vessels, the endless commerce that made this waterway vital. Somewhere below, perhaps, another submarine was creeping through the depths, its crew believing in their stealth, while American sensors painted them in digital clarity. Bandar Abbas, Iranian naval headquarters. Admiral Karimi sat in his office, reviewing the strategic assessment his staff had prepared. The conclusions were stark. The submarine force could no longer be considered a credible deterrent against American naval power. The technological gap was too wide, the detection capabilities too advanced. But the report also contained recommendations. Invest in quieter propulsion systems. Develop tactics that exploited the Gulf's shallow, thermally complex waters. Focus on areas where American sensors might be degraded near shore, in high traffic zones, during storms. It wasn't surrender, it was adaptation. Karimi thought of Ahmadi, who'd submitted a formal request to return to sea despite the humiliation of the tracked patrol. That was the kind of officer the Navy needed, one who could face failure and still have the courage to try again. The Americans had won this round. They demonstrated their superiority in a way that couldn't be denied or spun by propaganda. But naval warfare was a long game, played over decades. Technology changed. Tactics evolved. Today's advantage could become tomorrow's vulnerability. The submarine force would continue, smaller perhaps, more cautious, but still present, still a factor that had to be considered. Because the alternative, abandoning the underwater domain entirely, was unthinkable for a nation that depended on the Gulf for its survival. Karimi signed the assessment and forwarded it up the chain of command. Then he pulled out a separate file, the technical data the Americans had provided. Studying your enemy's capabilities was the first step toward countering them. It would take years, maybe decades, but the game wasn't over. Washington, D.C. Pentagon. Rear Admiral Thomas Garrett, Director of Submarine Warfare, briefed the Chief of Naval Operations on the Persian Gulf operation. The slides showed the Tareq's track, the sensor coverage, the diplomatic impact. Bottom line, sir, we've established clear ASW dominance in the Gulf. Iranian submarine operations have been significantly curtailed. The message has been received. The CNO nodded. Good work. Make sure this gets incorporated into our deterrence posture. I want potential adversaries to know that our ASW capabilities are generational. Yes, sir. Though I should note this works in the Gulf because it's a confined space with favorable acoustic conditions. In the open ocean, against more advanced submarines, the problem set is different. Understood, but for now we've secured a critical waterway and done it without escalation. That's a win. Garrett gathered his materials. The operation would be studied in war colleges, analyzed in think tanks, cited in budget hearings. It was a perfect example of how technological superiority could achieve strategic objectives without kinetic action. But he also knew that warfare was cyclical. Today's advantage bred tomorrow's countermeasure. The Iranians would adapt, develop new tactics, perhaps acquire better technology. And the game would continue, played in the depths where sunlight never reached, and silence was both weapon and shield. Epilogue: The Silent Service. In the years following the 2023 incident, the balance of power in the Persian Gulf remained heavily tilted toward American ASW capabilities. Iranian submarines continued to operate, but with the knowledge that their movements were likely being monitored. The psychological impact was profound. Crews that once felt protected by the ocean's depths now understood they were visible to an enemy they couldn't see. The Tareq returned to sea, Captain Ahmadi still in command. His patrols were shorter now, more cautious, focused on areas where acoustic conditions might provide some protection. It wasn't the submarine warfare he'd trained for, but it was the reality he faced. Aboard the Porter and dozens of other American warships, sonar technicians continued their endless watch, listening to the ocean's secrets. The technology improved each year. Better algorithms, more sensitive hydrophones, faster processing. The underwater domain, once a place of mystery and concealment, was becoming increasingly transparent. But the sea keeps its secrets still. In the depths, in the thermal layers, in the complex acoustic shadows of shallow waters, submarines still hunt and hide. The game continues, ancient as naval warfare itself, modern as the latest sensor technology. And somewhere in the Persian Gulf, a diesel-electric motor hums quietly in the darkness, its crew hoping that this time, maybe this time, they'll be the ones who remain unseen.